Welcome, stand-up paddle community. I'm Kristin Thomas, and on behalf of Supconnect, I'm excited to be here being your host for the every Thursday at either 1 p.m. or 4 p.m. Pacific time interview of someone interesting in the stand-up paddle community. And today is no exception. We've got someone who graciously got up early this morning. It's Friday in South Korea, where Melvin Palmiano, hopefully I got that straight, better known as Mel, sometimes as Melvin, which I thought was his last name for a long time. He is from Vancouver, Canada, and Siargao, Philippines, and I'm not going to try to say the name, South Korea. I forgot to ask you how to pronounce it. He's a stand-up paddle surfer, a stand-up paddle racer, part of the stand-up paddle industry, and he started a long time ago. So some big firsts we're going to talk about, and I'm going to invite him on right now. There he is. So welcome to our little Supconnect Live, Mel. Excited to talk with you. We had a good connection yesterday when we tested this, so there he is. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello.
Fantastic. I'm glad it's working. Great to have you on, Mel. So you
Thanks
are
for
an
having
OG. You are a really early adopter of stand-up paddleboarding, which is so cool. So we're going to talk about some big firsts, but why don't you start with just, where'd you find it? How'd you first get into stand-up paddling, and what got you hooked?
Well, again, thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Very grateful for giving me the opportunity. Well, my story basically is I'm living right now in South Korea, and at the time when I started, I'm from Vancouver, so we don't have many waves in Vancouver at all. And if we wanted to surf, it's basically a 5-hour trip anywhere. 5-hour trip to Portland, go to Oregon, Westport in Washington State. If you wanted to fly to Hawaii, it's a 5-hour flight. If you wanted to go to Tofino, you take a ferry, then it's like a 4 or 5-hour drive across the island. So what happened to me basically was I finished university. I was basically trying to find my way around. I had an internship and a job experience in Malaysia, but that was in the city. And then eventually I ended up going to Korea to do a teaching summer camp. Mm-hmm. And during the time where we were, there was a typhoon swell. And essentially the waves were overhead. There was nobody surfing. And I was like, I need to stay here. And essentially the place that I'm living in right now is called Gangneung. Most of you may have seen some of the place here because this was one of the cities for the past Winter Olympics in 2018. So we're on the coast, and essentially how it all started was, again, we didn't have many waves. And I remember podcasts were just kind of becoming the thing, and there was this podcast called Hawaiian Surf Sessions Report, and the host was a guy named Tommy Stokes. And like every week he would kind of have a report in Hawaii and on the waves, and he would always have a session that was sponsored by C4 Waterman. And
there we go.
Sort of, the OG
early SUP company for sure.
And yeah, they just showed these guys on like basically, big longboards. Like, I mean, back in the day, the SUP boards were basically 10 foot plus.
Yeah.
No,
a lot of them used tandem surfboards.
Yeah.
They said were their first SUP boards.
Exactly. And I mean, just seeing how these watermen were just maneuvering these like huge boards. And I was like, wow, I need to figure out how I can get one of those, because you're basically increasing your water time. Small waves, decent waves, flat water, you can just get on the water. And at the time, I was trying to find any place that was sent to South Korea. And we live in an apartment back then. So it was a matter of like, how can I get this board to fit in the elevator? And so I essentially ended up getting like an inflatable from them, just so that I could try and transport it and get it around. And essentially that was around 2007. And that's sort of how I started. I was watching videos from YouTube, the first video I saw was basically by C4, Brian Caldana, and Todd Bradley were like having like videos. And there's one video that I really watched a lot was by a guy named John Denny out of Florida.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that was basically the video that that was my number one lesson, like how to balance, how to do stuff, how to fall. And essentially that was really the first video
Oh, that's really cool. Does he know that he really got you
um,
started? He's a great guy.
I think, yeah, like back in the day, in the early days of Facebook, I kind of mentioned to him that,
Yeah.
you were really instrumental in me learning how to stand up paddle. And really that's what I watched
Very
pretty
cool.
much every day.
Yeah, I think you said another local inflatable you got local to us is Uli, which is one of the only
Yeah, yeah.
inflatable companies that was like made in the US.
Yeah,
No longer
exactly. And
here, but
actually, I think back then it was manufactured by Uli, but it had like the C4 Waterman
oh, okay.
sort of logo on it. So they were kind of
Hmm.
working together. And yeah, that was my first board. Learned how to surf on it, learned how to balance on it.
So
Basically,
you not only started early, but you brought stand-up paddleboarding to Korea. And you also, besides just being an active participant yourself, you also started retail. So you're selling there, right?
yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was more of, I could probably say more of a selfish endeavor because, it's so hard just to find equipment back then. And really the only way to get stuff and to get it, at least, for myself, a little bit less expensive was to essentially become a retailer.
Yeah.
And so I started off basically working with and promoting with C4 Waterman because they were really the only ones willing to send out to me. So I started off with inflatables because, again, knowing my experience here, just trying to get people interested, the important thing was really about transportation and storage. So I started with them. I did a couple of promos, a trade show here in Korea. And then I also sent out emails to a bunch of the other big brands. And one of the only other brands that got back to me was Starboard at the time. So I ended up starting with Starboard. As far as paddles, I basically started off retailing Kealoha paddles, partly because I started off paddling doing dragonboat and a bit of OC canoe back in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And that was basically the paddle that I started off with, and I just got used to the T-grip. And eventually I had a friend in Vancouver, Ross Priestley, who sold me my first Kealoha stand-up paddle. And eventually I was like, you know what, I really like this paddle. And, how do you think I can, again, become a retailer or agent for Kealoha? And he gave me all the information from Meg and Dave, and I sent them an email, and next thing you know, I'm selling Kealoha paddles in Korea.
And you still use Kealoha, and it's a wonderful family company, and it's Pacific Northwest, so that's Vancouver too,
Yeah,
but in the US.
I think, now they're underneath the branch of the paddle you use, Warner Paddles. So,
Yes.
So yeah,
two great companies based in the US. So yeah. Very cool. Well, it is so interesting to hear industry stuff. And you mentioned Starboard was in Thailand, and shipping has always been an issue for hardboards in stand-up paddleboarding. And so being in South Korea and being able to get from Thailand instead of shipping all the way from Hawaii, I'm sure was a big plus. Yeah. Any other early brands? I think you said you used a little Nash maybe.
Well, I know that.
Yeah.
Not really, but I mean, here in Korea, the water sports industry is very particular and different, I guess. Like I figured out the hard way how to market to customers. Because I mean, I think South Korea is on the windsurfing tour, and so there are a lot of the big brands that that are into windsurfing and also make stand-up boarding. So like Nash. Starboard. So a lot of those brands are recognizable within the windsurfing community. So it wasn't too difficult to try and at least get some stuff here because there was a name already here for windsurfing.
Absolutely. We've heard that a lot, that windsurfing companies were already making a board the size of a stand-up paddleboard, and already the big ones had international distribution. So it's a natural that they were the first to actually go out in many places in the world. So when did the naming the business Pine Ocean, and I forgot to ask you where that name came from, SUP?
Yeah. So the name Pine Ocean essentially, because I always wanted to show sort of respect for the location I'm in. I'm pretty loyal, so that's why, I mean, even I'm still with Kealoha just because I always wanted to have something within the roots of a sport. And the
Hmm.
roots of stand-up paddling, essentially, if we look at the history, is sort of based on the Waikiki Beach Boys, again, using like the big boards, taking photos of tourists. I mean, we can go in any culture, like Peru and all the other ones about paddling. But
Hmm.
what I really wanted to do was incorporate the city of Gangneung, which is on the coast. So essentially, that's where the ocean came from.
Yeah.
And Gangneung is also known within the country as Pine City because there's a lot of
Ah,
pine trees here.
got it.
So really, just an amalgamation of the both words to put together to sort of represent that stand-up paddling in Korea came from this location. This is where it sort of started from.
Yeah.
Mind you, just to sort of add in, I know that a lot of the early inflatable boards actually were made in South Korea at the beginning.
Ah, I didn't know
So,
that. Yeah.
so yeah, even though I may have started the actual physical thing out in the water and sort of promoting it, I also didn't realize that a lot of the boards in the past were actually made here. And
Yeah.
then now, obviously, for cost, they're in other countries. But yeah.
Well, you probably know well as a surfer that the adoption of inflatables in Hawaii and California and all were very slow. I mean, just in the last few years has that really caught on. But my understanding is all of Europe and Asia were early in on inflatables and have always had almost half because you mentioned one reason, the living situation, the ease of travel, and not being we have larger vehicles. I think maybe out out west, especially here. Putting the board on top doesn't always work if you are on a motorcycle or you're on a really tiny car. Anyway, lots of different reasons. So that's interesting that you carried both. You sold both hardboards and inflatables.
Yeah, I sold both. I started off with the inflatables first, and then just to have some variety, I did get into the harder boards because actually, even my first epoxy board was a Shrepper board, and I think the rider was Bonga Perkins. It was like a 10-foot step deck, like 28 inches wide. And I think for a lot of guys who started into stand-up paddling, that seemed to be the board as well that people started off with. Um, and after I got that, that's when I started said, hey, you know what? Maybe we should. Because actually, no, sorry, there was a lag as when I started, like 2017, and when I started my company, it was 2010. So I
Okay,
did
yeah,
still have the chance to sort of try the inflatable and then get into an epoxy board, and then eventually, I wanted to have a bit of difference because the
yeah,
performance is really different between an inflatable and an epoxy
yeah.
hardboard.
So sup surfing is what hooked you, but you also got into sup racing. Where and when was your first race? So 2007, you're surfing, you're in Korea, but you travel a
Yeah,
lot, obviously.
I try to. I mean, the hard thing obviously is about finances. And I mean, at the time I was working as an English teacher at a university. So you really don't have the flexibility as far as vacation time. So you have
Mm.
your winter vacation and your summer. Um, my first race actually was the Battle of the Paddle in 2010. Hey, you got the shirt. And
It's the wrong year. I couldn't find 2010. This is 11 with Danny Ching on the back. But we crossed paths there.
maybe, yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, yeah, 2010 was my first race. And just back then, it was just like, that was the race that if you wanted to get into racing, that was it. That was, yeah, like the Super Bowl of stand-up paddle racing. And I remember during that time, we had a sort of no, actually at that time, I took a break from working, and that's how I was able to get out in October. So yeah, so basically I got out to Vancouver, went with my dad. We just basically hung out for the weekend. It was the first time I tried a racing board. I was in the open division. Yeah, I was in the open division because it was just like also a matter of trying to find a board. So I sent emails to Chuck Patterson. He was like, oh yeah, you know, we'll be able to get you aboard. And again, at the time, I was also in contact with Todd Bradley from C4. And he's like, oh, no problem. We'll have you covered. Just, you know, just come out. And he's like, which race are you doing? I'm like, well, I guess I'll do the Open. Because all the pro riders are going to be using the boards. They get the priority. So I was like, no, man, I just want to be there. So they had a board for me. And I did the Open.
And you have a great picture on your Facebook that I stole, and I'm going to put it on the Facebook follow-up with your pictures. So in theory, it's a mass start. There's so many of us. So I was in that same start with you. I think they started men and women together Open, and it was a really crazy rectangle, just choppy mess of people falling in and running into each other.
Well,
and it was fun.
remember because for the Open, they had like different categories. So depending on what board you're going to use for the Open, was it they let the surf boards go first, and then I think it was like a staggered start, but it was still like.
But then we all ended up.
Them out, And then that crazy shore break at Doheny was always like a thing too back then. It was fun.
My home stomping grounds, but obviously we loved it and kept going, didn't we?
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that I really enjoyed about stand-up is when you have this mass of people who have just the same stoke, the same feeling and it's sort of like this camaraderie of paddlers and water people, and I think that's the one great thing that has kept me hooked for all these years.
Yeah. So I know, so you race sometimes when you're back in Vancouver. They have quite a race scene. I think, I forget what they call their evening ones or Deep Cove. Anyway, I saw some names,
out in Deep Cove. They have the Wave Chasers out in...
Wave Chaser, yeah.
So yeah, they've got a really good scene that's developed over the years, and they've got a lot of good races throughout the province. So it's nice to have seen all the development there as well.
Yeah, and then what is the SUP race scene like in South Korea?
The SUP race scene is still in its developmental stages, but there are races. Like over the last 5 years, they have increased a lot. The participation and the number of people who are in the industry right now has increased a lot. Surfing is still the main sort of grab you type activity, but I have friends as well who were sort of the first Koreans to start here in South Korea. My friend Jae-ho Lee has his own company called Surf Ocean, and he has three shops right now that basically deal with surfing, stand-up paddling. He gets into windsurfing and kiteboarding as well. So he's really helped in the initial development of the sport here. That's in Seoul. He also has a shop close to where we live. And then there's the other city of Busan, which is down south. There's a lot of shops right now who are getting into stand-up paddling. So there's a few brands now. So I mean, NSP is out here. There's a distributor for them, Starboard Korea. Nash is out here. I know that a friend of mine actually was also hoping to try and get Infinity out here. So there's just like a lot of people now trying to sort of wrestle in and bring in some different brands to expand, I guess, the lines and stuff. So no, it's good though. It's good, and a lot of people now, especially with the internet and the prevalence of all these races and athletes, it's so easy to find and learn now how to do the sport, as opposed to like when I started, it was so difficult just to try and figure out, okay, what size paddle, you know, how do I do this? So it's
a lot of experimenting and being willing to take a risk when you're an early adopter of something. Absolutely. Then you reminded me, one of the first times, because we've been connected kind of on Facebook, I totally forgot about this, because this was Supconnect was having a photo contest. They just wrapped up another round of contests. They still do this. And I kept telling them they have such gorgeous photos, they need to make a calendar. They said, we don't have time. You make a calendar. So I made this calendar. It was so out of my comfort zone, like a project. But I remember one of the main things I wanted it to be was a race calendar. Yeah. And look at how many races, like we're in a month. It was pretty challenging to try to find them. but it's kind of crazy. There were a lot of things going on in this year, 2012, and getting that calendar out that I must have shipped to you. Where were you in 2012?
I was in Korea then. I
Yeah,
was working at the university still, and yeah, and I saw that, and that's how I really got into contact with you the first time. And you sent me the
yeah.
calendar, and it was on my wall, and I still have it as well.
I know. But it makes me smile looking back at, I mean, the names on some of the people who are in the pictures, took the pictures. I did this with Thomas Maximus, which was a local guy here,
Yeah.
and we did it as a fundraiser. Organizations that have, aren't around anymore, like Stand Up Paddle Alliance, but lots of good stuff in the early days. 2014 was a big year for
Yeah.
SUP surfing for you. You participated representing Canada in the
Yes.
ISAs. And where were they
Yeah.
that year?
They were in Nicaragua that year. That was, I think, the third year for the ISA World SUP and Paddleboard Championships. The previous 2 years were in Peru. So yeah, I would probably say that is the highlight so far of my entire SUP career. Just having the privilege and honor to represent your country.
Absolutely.
Was huge, and I mean for me too, just trying to figure out how to stand up surf effectively. Like, I mean, it's such a different sport compared to regular surfing in terms of your positioning and using the paddle as leverage. And again, there was still so little as far as information on how to do things. And at that time too, the transition of boards were getting smaller. I remember at that time, for me, it was always like, I'm never going to be able to afford a cardboard board, too expensive. They're getting smaller. And for me, it was always about volume. And so at that time, I had the 711 Starboard, and it was like 100 and something liters. And I thought, yeah, this is probably the last board I'm going to get. But in terms of the actual trip, just being with the best in the world was for me like the experience of a lifetime. Just like seeing them, approaching them, asking them questions. I think the one great thing too about all the stand-up paddlers, even the elite guys are there, and women, they're so open to share information, to give you help. Like these superstars like Connor Baxter, Zane Schweitzer, like Kai Lenny, all these guys who you see doing these amazing things are the most down-to-earth, approachable people. And I think that's the one gift that I have found with the stand-up paddling community, is that they're just so open. If you have a question, they'll go out of the way to help you. And
love that
for me,
about the community.
And for me, that was the most important thing, because I'm just trying to figure out how I can do all these maneuvers and turns, and you can watch them, you can pick up pointers and tips. Sean Pointer was there, who was also like super gracious, and just again would have no problem answering any questions and taking the time out to help anybody.
And our connection there is the female SUP surfer for Canada. It's my friend Diane Wenzel. Shout out to you, Diane.
She was like, for me, like I'd always in my head go, "Oh, captain, my captain," because she was kind of like the mother of the group who would sort of just like direct us and tell us what to do. Because I mean, she also had the most experience. Like she went to pretty much the previous two ISA championships as well. So, and I mean, actually back then too, we didn't have a national contest. So really, it was kind of like that sort of beginning where who wants to join? Send us a video, send us an application, and I was just really lucky and fortunate enough to have been selected, because I mean we had Lena Gaustis, who again I think still to this day, even though she's a mom of two, is still probably one of the top women racers in the world.
She jumps back in there and gets right back up on the podium. She's
still
amazing. Such an athlete.
So, and I'm inspired by her just because she's a parent too, and I have my own two kids, and I'm just watching all these people and seeing how they can raise their kids and give them experiences and stuff like that. So it's great.
And we do have to mention, it could be a whole topic. We're not going to go into it too much, but while you were sleeping, because it's morning there were announcements everywhere. Maybe it was out before that, but I hadn't seen it, that the International Court of Arbitration of the International Olympic Committee did make a decision and did give ISA the jurisdiction over stand-up paddling in the Olympic pursuit. It's more complicated than that. There's a bunch of stuff going around right now, and the International Canoe Federation. I actually think it's, I had heard that it wasn't going to be super definitive, but it's definitive enough that we can make some steps in that direction. So hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more of SUP, you know, in the direction of the Olympics. Not everybody thinks that's the ultimate dream. I'm one who does. Just I've always thought there's actually this amazing Nike ad out. Have you seen it? It's a really amazing split video that's about how sport unifies. It's about what we're going to talk about in a minute too, diversity and everything. But there's nothing like having all those countries there. I mean, I remember watching the first ISAs and getting goosebumps watching, you know, the parade of nations and everything. There's nothing like that where we see our similarities, you know, over our differences. So it's really, really special, I think, that you were part of an ISA, that there's decisions being made, hopefully, you know, and that we will see the growth. But I also love that ICF is posting that we want to still help SUP grow, because canoe and kayak is also just a huge part and overlap with what we are. We definitely both had good reasons to want to be a part of it. But it's been an interesting road watching all of that happen. Glad something finally came out. Let's back up a little bit, because although you're in Korea right now, you are living for the most part since 2017, I think you said, in the Philippines. I've seen pictures of it, an absolutely gorgeous island, Siargao Island, kind of a tourist place. I assume there's good surfing down there?
Yeah. I mean, Siargao is known within the surfing community because of a break called Cloud 9. It's this barreling right, which is also known as Crowd 9 because it tends to get pretty busy. But yeah, we every year my wife would always try to get us during the winter vacations, because Korean winters get pretty cold. And I remember for the Olympics, I think they were saying it was like the coldest winter Olympics on record, and that a lot of athletes were complaining how cold it was, which was funny to me because I never thought they would complain about cold weather because it's the Winter Olympics. But
yeah,
every winter we would try to go somewhere warm to get kids to at least have a chance to surf a bit, because obviously at a young age you don't want your kids to be in the cold water too much. So one year we actually went to Philippines one year, and then another year we went to Bali, and then my friend who I mentioned, Jeho, was like, hey, you know what, you should come out to Siargao. And I was like, yeah, okay. Because I remember hearing about Siargao way back when I was actually back in high school, because Surfer Magazine talked about this place. And I remember asking my dad, where is this? And he's like, oh, it's like way down south. And at that time, there weren't any airplanes way back then. So basically you had to take a boat from Cebu, which is like an overnight boat, to another island, and then another 3-4 hour boat over. So I was like, okay, well, this is the chance that we can go. Let's check it out. And we went there the winter of 2017, like December 2017. We spent about a month there, and my wife absolutely loved it. And she was like, we need to live here. We need to move here. And I was like, no, I don't want to actually move here, because I mean, it's not first world. You know, Korea is, and it's so convenient to get everything and do everything here. And I was like, no, because I know if I move here, I'm going to be doing everything. I have to deal with all the power outages, you know, the lack of supplies. There is no actual modern hospital there. So if the kids get sick, if we get hurt surfing or whatever, a road accident, I don't know what to do. But she's an elementary school teacher, which is basically a government position. And because our youngest daughter wasn't in grade school yet, there's a benefit that the teachers have here where they can take sort of a 2-year sort of sabbatical, in a sense, or an extended maternity. And she's like, I don't want to waste it. I want to go there and use it, and let's try something different. So yeah, things kind of happen here that are sort of constant cultural differences. And I was like, yeah, okay, let's go. Let's do it. So this decision was made like in October of 218, I think, or I'm getting my, but it was made like really late because we had to make a decision to move out after the Winter Olympics in 2018. So actually, yeah. So that means made the decision October 2017 to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to sell our apartment, get rid of stuff, and then basically our target date was to leave before the end of those Winter Games. So by February 20-something, we were on our way to Siargao.
And it's so interesting because you were born in the Philippines. That's where your roots are. And she's born in Korea. But she's the one who really wanted to go there.
She's the one who wanted to go there. Partly because I think, growing up, I don't fit the traditional look of a Filipino. And as a kid growing up, I never really did see myself as Filipino in a sense, partly because no one ever thought of me as Filipino growing up. So I kind of more or less felt more Canadian in a sense, because, I went to school there, I grew up there, and even growing up, I never really felt Filipino. Or my parents, we kind of went in and out with families and stuff, but we were pretty much on our own. And so I never thought I would actually go back to the Philippines, because I actually went to school there earlier on, like in grade 1, and I was teased every day
Really?
And so as a kid, that stuff kind of sticks with you. And actually, going back to say ISA, I kind of also said, you know what? I know Team Japan is out there. And even throughout my life growing up, people would never see me as Canadian. They're like, "What? You're Canadian?" I go, "You don't look Canadian." I go, "Well, America, Canada, we're not really a race."
Yeah.
We're a country of different ethnicities and races. So that was always a sticking point for me growing up, and even to this day. So I also felt really honored to be on the Canadian team to sort of represent the fact that, as Canadians or even as Americans, we are a bunch of different ethnicities and races, and you can't just see us as one. So it was really important for me to actually go and participate for that as well. But yeah, it was a great experience. Like, we have a house there. We ended up buying some land and building a house. And then, of course, the whole pandemic thing came, and it was basically a last-minute decision to, like, you know what, we better get out of here because there's no hospital. And from what I can see, because I was basically getting news from US, Canada, Korea, and it was like, the people here in the Philippines are taking this too lightly, and I don't want to get caught and get stuck. And I think a week and a half after we left, they basically went on lockdown, and they're still on lockdown right now. So we're really lucky to get out. Where we live, we are fortunate that there aren't too many cases. I think the province that we live in has only about 72 cases. Most of the cases in Korea are in this whole region, and where they had that big, huge infection rate in Daegu. But everything so far here has been under control. A few sort of cases every once in a while, but
good. Well, stay healthy. Well, I do love your children just look like great little skateboard rats. But you post some great stuff of them being active and getting out, and I think that's fun how you're raising them with lots of different languages and cultures. And I think you said they even have passports maybe and from different countries, right? With all the travel and where they're born and where their parents were born.
They've got 3 right now, because before we moved to the Philippines, I was able to reacquire my Philippine citizenship. So I have that and my Canadian. But since my wife is Korean, they actually have Philippine, Canadian, and South Korean passports right now. So it's a bit of a duty when we travel, because I have to carry all of those passports together.
That is a stack, huh? Even with just a family of 4. A lot. Hey, I wanted to just give you kudos for your environmental efforts, because I see a lot of posts, I see and hashtags and groups that you're involved with. So I just think that's fantastic. I wonder sometimes how far some of those efforts go, but I see and hear that you're really active in the reuse and anti-plastics and
Yeah.
a lot of those efforts. So did you have to bring those in, or are there plenty of groups in Philippines, South Korea to connect with? Is
Yeah,
it more global?
yeah. I think global and local at the same time. Again, I was kind of reticent about going to Siargao, but the one thing that really sort of changed my mind is there's a group that I'm associated with as well and volunteered for called Sea Movement, which is the Siargao Environmental Association movement, which basically deals with the whole single-use plastics issue. They more or less have single-handedly helped create a local law where none of the stores can use plastic bags post-retail. So everything is a reusable bag, which they call an environmental bag, which you can use more than once. They have really lobbied to try and keep the island as plastic-free as possible because, I mean, the Philippines in itself is the #3 worst polluter in terms of single-use plastics.
Wow.
I think China is first. I can't remember what the second one was, but Thailand. But Philippines is #3.
Wow.
Partly because there's a lot of disposable packaging. Economically wise, most people can't buy the larger bulk, so they put stuff in little satchels, which is one of the reasons why there's so much plastic pollution there. So I was able
Well,
to
that's
join.
yeah. Being a
Yeah,
country of islands, I think it's even more of a concern, and us being water people, because that's where those plastics often end up and on their shores. So that's great. You're
so
involved there.
I was involved with them. Prior to going to Philippines, I tried to do a lot of that stuff here as well. Just doing beach cleanups, organizing some beach cleanups, because again, as I mentioned, things here are so convenient. There's a lot of convenience stores and everything is pretty much overpackaged. And I think that seems to be the case in most of Asia as well. So yeah, essentially really for me was, I think there's that one video that was really viral a few years ago about the straw in the nose of the turtle.
Oh yeah.
And that thing, I think for like other people, it really was an impactful video. And from that moment, I kind of was like, yeah, we really need to do something, because really not so much for myself, but for the generations after. Like, I'm thinking about my kids, I'm thinking about other people's kids. And there's that one video by Carl Sagan that sort of talks about the pale blue dot. So if you go on YouTube and you watch the video, it talks about the entire history of mankind is all in this pale blue dot. And so it's really just a matter of trying to preserve what we have for as long as we have. And for me, that's just something that's so important. And for us as watermen, waterwomen, surfers, anything, I mean, we just rely on the ocean so much. And it's also very important just for everything to live, because most of the oxygen that is produced is really from the ocean as well. So we need to really keep the oceans, protected.
Great. Well, thanks again for your efforts and beautiful thoughts. So you've traveled a lot. Are there places you haven't been? Do you have some SUP destinations? What would be top of your list as some places you'd like to go?
My very top destination is eventually to make it out to Tahiti. That has always been in my mind, like high school, and I always kick myself because in Canada, we're bilingual. We're taught French and English, but I grew up in Vancouver, which unfortunately we don't.
Not the same as Montreal.
I didn't put much focus on practicing my French, and then I really kicked myself, going, I could have tried to move to like Tahiti if my French was so much better. So that's also part of the reason why we decided to also go to the Philippines, because it's the closest thing I can get to Tahiti right now.
Yeah, they do have just an amazing waterman culture, and we've seen lots of stand-up paddle. Great stuff come out of Tahiti. I agree. I mean, just everything about it looks so appealing. So Tahiti's a top one. Any other?
Top one. I've never been able to surf or paddle in Hawaii, so I'd like to, do that. I've been there numerous times just to surf, body surf, and vacation, but I've never been on a stand-up paddleboard over there. And I also want to try and into canoe surfing, so I want to try that.
Cool. Yeah, we just had to cancel our Maui vacation, and I was so hoping. I haven't been there since stand-up paddling, so the Maliko run is just so high on my list of things to get to do. That awesome downwind run on any kind of watercraft. Yeah.
And you've done the M2O, right?
Yes. So I have been to Oahu and Molokai, but not to Maui in the last decade. Okay. So I have not stand-up paddleboarded Maui yet.
Because that is the bucket.
Yeah.
The M2O, the actual M2O. I did the virtual race, which is not quite the same, but it is great because you have, like we were saying, that communal feeling of like, you know, I'm doing so many other people. I think they said there's like 1,800 participants.
56 different countries. I thought that was just an amazing. This virtual racing, making the best of a bad situation, has ended up being really special in a lot of ways. And that connection. So we did it here also. We did it wasn't downwind, but an ocean run.
That's awesome because again, that's stories that you can share with other people. So it brings out the sport to more, and then at any craft. So like they were saying, the hashtag anything goes. So it's just nice to have some positivity out of all the stuff that's
we raced together there too. Not actually there, but we've done M2O together. Yeah. And then how about some tips? What are 3 things you've learned kind of in helping someone get into stand-up paddleboarding from all your different SUP experience?
Okay. So 3 tips essentially would be, I think, perseverance. It's not as easy as it looks. You know, the guys and girls who are really good at it make it look easy because they're really good at it. So perseverance, try and find the correct board. So a wide board, craft board. Also make sure that the conditions are right. Don't start up anywhere choppy. Try and find a lagoon or someplace that's protected from the wind and chop. Have a buddy. Have somebody who may already know how to do it with you. Because the number one thing also is really safety. I mean, you are in the water. And again, as easy as it looks, it is very dangerous if you don't know how to respect the water that you're on. So really safety, perseverance, and I guess not even 3/4, I guess it's really just to have fun and enjoy it because it's a different element. So
water is such an amazing element, and I'm so addicted to it. But it's amazing. I live in a coastal tourist town, and there's deaths every year because people don't respect Mother Ocean. They don't understand it, and they think it's just this lovely thing to splash in, and they don't know about waves and tides and
and currents to everything. Currents. It's that's the problem here too, because I mean here it's the summer season. I mean it's not as busy at the beaches because there are some restrictions right now for COVID and stuff, but there's still people who are drowning and getting swept out because of the currents and the shore break. So it's really something that people have to really respect and try to understand that it's fun when you see it on TV and media, but it is a potential death trap. So you have to respect it.
Yeah, I'm always surprised that when people don't know how to swim and they stand up paddleboard. I think it's so important.
So leash and life jacket if you don't.
Absolutely. Both important. You stand up paddle surf, you stand up paddle race, you've explored. Are there any new aspects? Some of them, I don't know if we can really call them stand up paddling, but there's a lot of new stuff going on. Are you interested in exploring any of the newest things like foil or wings or?
Like I did get a Go foil before I left for the Philippines. I just haven't been able to use it a lot. Just conditions wise, like I am progressing, but then I take a huge break, then I go back and have a hard time. So so I really want to get into that because I actually wanted to do that as opposed to regular racing, just because traveling is so much easier with smaller equipment. So I hope to get back into that. I'm wanting to get a better foil so I can get into smaller conditions. So I really want to improve on that. I really want to do river stand-up. Like, I've never tried that. I've seen so many friends do it out in British Columbia, and it just looks so fun, and it looks so challenging that I'd like to try it.
It is very fun and challenging. And if you come to California, you can borrow my helmet and inherently buoyant life jacket and the hook leash that does have some specialized equipment that you need, but it's really fun. And yes, very challenging. Of course, you know, every river is different, just like with surfing, only kind of amped up, I would say, even more.
Yeah. Like, I'm amazed how guys stay on the board. I'm like, wow. But yeah, I like to try that.
Yeah. So that is super fun. Well, one of the things we brought up that we're going to talk about, and we're kind of just going to start the conversation because I'd really like to move this into kind of a panel, because it's come up a few times lately, and right now in America, we have a lot of discussions going on about around race and everything. But you brought up in a post that I saw about diversity in stand-up paddleboarding, and then there's a lot of different aspects of that to kind of unpack. But kind of tell me what your thoughts were in that. And what you're seeing.
Well, like I mentioned too, the one thing that I really love about stand-up paddling is that everybody has the same mindset. And I think that's the one thing that really keeps us connected, is that mindset to enjoy the ocean, enjoy the water, and be together, and prove to yourself that you can overcome the challenge. But as far as, that post, and as I said too, when I represented Canada, like, this having a different face and feeling proud that as a Canadian we have different ethnicities and races. The one thing really that got to me was essentially I didn't see much diversity in any of the social media posts from any of the major brands, just stand-up magazines, or just any sort of social media outlet that had to do with SUP. There was very little diversity in terms of the paddlers. Most of the paddle scenes or people always fit this sort of archetypal image, and it tends to bother me. So I kind of I made a post and just sort of said, you know, if we're really trying to be inclusive and we're trying to get more people to experience the same things that we have experienced and come to love, we should have different people of color on social media, because I think social media has become so impactful in how we think and we see and how we think about ourselves that it's important to have a diverse collective in social media to make people think that, hey, you know, that looks fun. There's somebody else that may look like me that is doing this, and I really want to do this, but there's something about it that is kind of pushing me off. Like, I mean, like we're talking about, being in the water is already a challenge. But if you're constantly bombarded every day by images that you see on social media, I think subconsciously you're also affected by that. And it prevents you from pursuing things that in your mind you want to do, but there's something really holding you back.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot in the industry association, and you know, you need to see yourself in something, in the visuals that you're getting, whether it's print or social media or wherever it is. So I think we need to, bring that. We need to listen. We need to talk about this and bring it up with brands. And sometimes it's unawareness. It's not, lack of. But I think if there's more thought put into this, that we could see more of that. But it does bring up other issues too. I said, I mentioned that inclusivity. I use that word with stand-up paddling because everyone should be able to do it. But there are other hurdles to access too. And, you know, what communities, maybe learning how to swim, for instance, isn't, and being water isn't something that they see. So it goes beyond just stand-up paddleboarding. And I know, at least in the US, there's a lot of grants and things to get youth, especially city youth or underprivileged youth, out into nature and out into community. The Outdoor Industry Association is huge on that. They just had a virtual trade show, and almost all the discussions were about that type of thing. And even beyond that, even though I think this is the more important focus, but just different shapes and sizes and different dynamics. And it doesn't need to be this fit male and female that we see in every airplane ad that have no safety equipment on, by the way. But they're usually, Caucasian, super fit, young. It's like the same every time. And that's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
reflective of what stand-up paddling can be and should be. And I think
Mhm.
is. I mean,
No,
where's,
exactly. Exactly. And then I think that's the thing, like, you know, there is a fledgling Asian sub tour going on between, say, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong. And again, you know, I don't see much promotion from the other industry heads or social media. And I think, and most of the countries here who are doing stand-up paddling in the Asian region are still also using the big brand. So I think just at least having the thought of sharing images of other people who are using your product would go a long way. And as you said, different shapes, different colors of people. Because I mean, those are the customers who help, you know, the sport continue.
Mhm.
It's really not the elite racers. Those guys are a different class. But it's
Absolutely.
sort of like I'm not an elite racer in the sense that I can't really keep up. I like doing the sport. I try my best to do the sport, but I'm a fan of those guys as much as anybody else. And I want to strive to be like them. I may not be able to do the same things or at the same ability, but I want to try and do it.
Yeah.
And I think for anybody else, because it's such a healthy sport, like
Hmm.
I'm probably in the best shape of my life right now at 46 than I was way back in high school.
Yeah.
I just as far as weight loss, slimming down, muscle, I'm probably in the best shape that I've ever been since high school. And I think, especially, you know, we always tend to beat up on the U.S. because of the statistics and stuff. But, you know, as far as obesity, health, eating habits, I mean, this sport in itself can help so much in terms of reducing health costs and everything else. And
Yeah.
like, again, even just nature, helping protect your environment, it's so important, I think. And that's why sometimes I'm really like, yeah, like I tend to be really passionate about that. And I think about my kids, I think about other kids and all my friends who are doing it. And it's so
Yeah.
important.
Well, and it is so important to build, like you said, there's just getting into stand-up paddleboarding and encouraging people on that level. That's
Mhm.
how we build the little niche parts like
Yeah.
surfing and racing that are at the top. But even within racing, it's a triangle too. And I'm an age
Mhm.
group racer, and I'd like to know like where I fit in that. And I want the whole
Yeah.
world to be a part of that. That's why
Yeah.
Olympic type pursuits really excite me when it's happens to be country
Mhm.
representation is a great way to divide it. Doesn't have to be, but there's as much camaraderie as there is competition and
Oh,
things like
for
that.
sure.
But bringing
Exactly.
together. But yes, we need to all be represented. You know, females too. We've had, I think, good success with stand-up paddling because we keep reminding people this is the first water sport that has as many women as men, and just trying to get it right, being
Yeah.
new from the start instead of having to start over and go
And
back.
like, just by going by equal board length and prize money, I mean, that's a big step. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, you know, you watch some of the female paddlers who, you know, every single one of those women can kick my butt. And I cheer for them as much as the guys, partly because they're racing the same exact distance. I mean, you can't, in a sense, you can't really compare men and women. You have to, that's why they have different classes. But comparing women to women in the sport, man, and being in like the heavy water event, like
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do that. So to see that for me is just amazing. And again, I have a
Yeah.
daughter too, and I have so much inspiration just watching Candace and all like the OG women go through the trials and being pioneers like yourself, still paddling and doing all this stuff and still kicking people's butts. Like I want to be like this, and I want to be like Candace and all those women also. Like I mean, I find so much inspiration just to improve myself by watching them,
Yeah.
just as much as say the guys too. So
Well,
so
we want
yes,
everyone. I'm having daughters also. We want them to have every opportunity, you know, and to
exactly.
make their own decisions about what they want to do, not to be told they can't or so. It has been a pretty exciting and for you, almost what 14 years of stand-up paddling. For me, just 10. But it's been pretty wild to watch a lot of the growth and changes. If you could go back and tell yourself then what you know now, what would you change about getting started in stand-up paddleboarding?
If I would something I would change, I'd probably say, yeah, just get that carbon board first. I mean, I don't think I can go back to a regular epoxy board, but I think it would have been like, yeah, just don't be so conservative and try to push your limits a little bit. Be safe, but really, really try to go maximum effort in the challenge. So again, that's for me personally. Other people will have different rates of stuff. So again, just get over that mental hurdle if you can. It's always tough, but I mean, there's so many people doing this sport that, just give it a try and then see if you like it. And if you don't, find something else that you enjoy doing. But this sport is open for everyone. There are so many niche parts to it, so that you'll always find something to do on the water.
Absolutely. Well, with that, we're going to thank you, Mel or Melvin. Go by both. Your last name is not Vin, as I said for a long time. So great to talk with you. I mean, you're a true SUP citizen of the world, living all over the globe. And thank you for sharing the Stoke and getting things started in Korea with stand-up paddle, South Korea with stand-up paddleboarding. So awesome. And we're going to stay in touch and continue the discussion about diversity and inclusion. And we want especially the brands and the media to hear it.
Yeah.
And everyone.
Yep.
Get more representation.
Hopefully we'll see more pictures of stand-up paddlers around the world, not just North America and Europe. We do that here in Asia as well, and I'm sure other places too. So especially now with the ISA decision, it's going to become more global. So it would be nice to see a variety of faces and places and images from social media, from every social media outlet.
Yeah.
A good time to start.
I'm with you. And just want to remind everybody that there is a Facebook group called Supconnect Live Discussions. We'd love you to join us there. And we'll post some pictures. We'll make sure to have links if you want to get into contact with Mel. You'll be able to do it there. All righty. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
Hi, Canada. Everybody else. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, absolutely.